going to share with you 5 lessons from the story of Joseph to help you to discover your calling and to operate in it. Now, when I say calling, I am referring to a talent and assignment that you have, something that you've been born with that God has given you. We all have a unique talent and assignment. And in the story of Joseph, there are lessons that you can learn that I'm going to show you to learn about your calling. So, the first lesson is your talent can be discovered at any age. In Genesis chapter 37, Joseph was just 17 years old when he began to have dreams. Now, if you're familiar with the story of Joseph, or if you're not, his brothers hated Joseph. And that is because Joseph's father, Jacob, loved him very much. So Joseph had a couple of dreams and he told his brothers and he told his father, and that made his brothers hate him more. What I want you to get out of this is that you're never too young or too old to discover your talent. Sometimes we suppress things because we think we're a certain age or we're just too young or just too old. And your talent is something that you are born with. So you can discover it at any time in your 20s or you're in your 60s. Plus, you have a talent, you have an assignment, and you can discover it. The second lesson is your talent and assignment may be revealed in parts. If you notice from the story of Joseph, he started to have dreams at 17 years old. It wasn't until later that he started to interpret dreams. And this happened when he was in prison, when he interpreted the dreams of the chief baker and the chief cupbearer, and also when he interpreted the dream for Pharaoh. Now, it states that he was about 30 years old when he was brought before Pharaoh to interpret the dream. So from 17 to 30, that's even before then when he was in prison, it was about a couple of years. So I guess late 20s. So from 17 to then, that's several years that he started to interpret dreams. So your talent and assignment may be revealed to you in parts and not all at once. Now, there may be 2 reasons for that. The first reason could be if you saw the big picture of what it is that you are to do, it may intimidate you. And it's not because you wouldn't like it, it could be because it's an area that you didn't think that you could ever do, or it could be the way you see yourself. And if you're able to do it, that could be a reason why God doesn't reveal your talent and assignment all at once. The second reason could be for humility. There could be a humility period that God wants you to go through before you get to your be able to operate in your calling. And so as we know that in order for us to operate fully and successfully in our calling, we want to be humble. And so there may be a period that God wants to take us through for that reason. Now, I know that this happened to me where I had to wait for the full vision of what God has called me to do. It was revealed in parts. Now, another lesson that I want you to get from this is the assignment. So, even though Joseph's talent and ability was to interpret dreams, the assignment was to get his family to Egypt. So he had to go before them. And he said that himself in Genesis, how it was God that led him to go before his family into Egypt to get them there because there was a famine in the land, which is part of the interpretation of Pharaoh's dream. And the famine affected lands around them, including where his father Jacob lived and his brothers. So, because of the famine, Joseph brought his father and his brothers to Egypt to escape the famine. And as you know, if you are familiar with the background, that God had promised Abraham that his descendants would be as many as the stars in the sky, and Jacob is part of that lineage. And so God had to preserve him and his descendants, and they came to Egypt. Now, we know the story. If you know the story, later on, they became slaves in Egypt. But at the time of Joseph's reign, he had so much favor that it was good for them to come and also to save them from the destruction of famine. So, although Joseph had the talent and ability to interpret dreams, the assignment was for him to go before his family to bring them to Egypt. The third lesson we learn from the story of Joseph is when you operate in your calling, there will be favor, benefits, and promotion, even if you work for someone else. We can see from Joseph's life that he was sold into slavery, and as a result, he was taken to Potiphar's house. Now, Potiphar was in under Pharaoh, and he was part of Pharaoh's ranks, and he was a chief counsel. And so Joseph was given to him, and he served Potiphar, and he was promoted to be in charge of Potiphar's house. So Joseph went from a slave to in a position where he was in charge of things. But then he interpreted the Pharaoh's dream because I believe it was the chief cupbearer that remembered him and how Joseph interpreted his dream. And so he remembered Joseph, and Joseph was taken out of prison to stand before Pharaoh to interpret his dream. And after that, Pharaoh was so marveled. He was just in awe of Joseph's discernment and wisdom and how he was able to interpret his dream because no one else could, that he promoted Joseph as the second in the land underneath him. So there was no one that was higher in rank outside of Pharaoh than Joseph. So when you operate in your calling, even if you work for someone else, there will be favor, there will be benefits, there will be promotion. I do believe that often when people think about their calling and their work purpose, they often think about being in business for themselves. I believe there are some people who will be in business for themselves, that some people are called to entrepreneurship. I believe that I am. But I also believe, let's just look at Joseph's life. He was, in essence, on someone else's payroll. He was working for a company. This was the Egyptian empire. This was not his own business, but he had so much favor and he was operating in his purpose that Pharaoh and the Egyptian relied on him, his gift, his talent, that to make their land prosperous because the interpretation he gave of that dream was such a value that Pharaoh promoted him to just to be the second in line to him. That's a huge rank. That's being high up in a company. So when you are operating in your calling, if you're working for someone else and you're on their payroll, it would feel like you're not because you will have so much favor. And when you look at when Joseph was promoted by Pharaoh, it says that he gave Joseph his ring. He gave Joseph fine clothes. He had a chariot. So prosperity followed that assignment. So think about it in today's terms. You have a company's car, maybe trips, you have benefits, you can take off when you want, you have flexible work life balance, your compensation is good, you're getting paid well, and you don't even own your own business. So, for people who own their businesses, know how much work we have to do and to be able to feel like you have your own business but you don't have the some of the duties and responsibilities that most of us have in owning our own businesses. That's a blessing. So but some people are called to be entrepreneurships, but I want you to think about Joseph's story. He in essence was on someone else's payroll, but he was not relying on anybody for his talent and for his assignment. And in reverse, they were actually relying on him. He was calling the shots. There was no micromanagement, there was no mismanagement because he was that high up. And so, even though he had a job with someone else, God was with them, and there was so much favor and promotion and prosperity that went with it. This happens to me in a similar case where part of my assignment or my talent is recruitment. Now, I do help people discover their calling, but most people are in jobs and careers, and it's a process to get to your calling. And so, because I worked in recruitment for about 12 years for other companies, I really know the job market and can help people change careers and switch jobs, because most likely that's probably needs to happen if you're going to pursue your calling. And so I help people with that. And actually, when you look up a career in the dictionary, one of the definition is a permanent calling. But we've been trained to think about career in it involves a job for a company that we don't like. But that's not how it was meant to be with God, with the talents that He has given you. So, from the story of Joseph, we see that you can be very prosperous. So back to me, I when I recruited for a company for companies, I was able to fill positions and find candidates that other recruiters weren't able to find. So managers would come to me and ask me to fill this position and find these type of candidates, and I would, because I was operating in my talent. And because of that, I was getting bonuses on the spot, favor, flexibility in my schedule. I was able to solve a problem. They saw the value in what I was bringing to the position. So it almost seemed like I wasn't even on their payroll because of the favor that was given to me. So when you operate in your calling, there will be favor, benefits, and promotion. The fourth lesson is be prepared for any twist on your path towards your calling. Now, as we can see from the story of Joseph in Genesis chapter 39, he was wrongly accused with trying to sleep with Potiphar's wife. And because of that accusation and lie, he was put in prison for about a couple of years or so. So I'm sure Joseph did not anticipate that to happen. He was being promoted, he went from a slave to being in charge over Potiphar's house, and then this happens. So I'm not saying that something drastic like that will happen to you, but on your path towards operating in your calling, there may be some twists or turns along the way. But remember that your calling is always with you. It's something that you were born with. It never leaves you. So no matter what season you're in, whether it's a negative season or a positive season, your assignment, your talent is still with you, and God will lead you to your calling. He will continue to lead you on that path. The fifth and final lesson is the characteristic of your calling. And this characteristic will be in everybody's calling, and that is it will solve a problem or problems. So, from Joseph, because he had the ability and talent to interpret dreams, it solved a problem. His assignment to go before his family to get Jacob and his family, which the Israelites became in Egypt, was that was his assignment. So he solved that problem to get his family there. So your calling will be to solve problems. So Pharaoh saw the value in Joseph calling, and that is why he prospered. So whether you work for someone else or you work for yourself and you have an audience, people will see the value in your talent. They will see the wisdom and the discernment, like Pharaoh saw with Joseph. And people will value that calling. But always remember and not lose focus that is there to help people, is there to solve a problem. Because the famine in the land, if there was no one to have been able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, that would have been drastic. But because Joseph had the talent and his assignment was in Pharaoh's house and to interpret this dream, it actually saved his family and it saved the land of Egypt. That was considered very valuable to Pharaoh. So your calling will solve a problem. I hope these lessons have helped you to want to know your calling, or if you already know your calling, to give you some better perspective on how you view it. And so I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you next time.